Done.
I saw it.
Oh, you did? I didn't. All right,
Yeah,
never mind. Here
you're
we go.
live.
Welcome back to the Happiest CEO podcast. I'm your host, Sebastian. Today, our guest is Tyler Tolman, an internationally recognized wellness educator, fasting expert, author, and speaker who has spent more than 3 decades helping thousands of people transforming their health. Through retreats, coaching, and education, he built a global online and in-person community focusing on longevity, vitality, and living with purpose. In recent years, Tyler has also developed a deep fascination and understanding of ancient Egypt, leading educational tours and exploring what he believes modern society can still learn from one of the history's greatest civilizations. So today we will explore Tyler's remarkable personal journey, the science and philosophy behind fasting, what health really looks like in today's world, and why an unexpected passion for ancient Egypt has become such an important part of his life. So welcome, Tyler, to the show. I'm really humbled that you're here and that you made time for this. I know you have a really busy life, so thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me and looking forward to sharing.
Brilliant. When I think about Tyler Tolman, what comes to mind is access to so much knowledge that you have gathered and been exposed over the years, and then blending that, and I think that's the most remarkable part, putting it in systems that are actually digestible, because there's so much knowledge out there, old and new, but it's something else when you actually can make it available for people. And I think you really have mastered that through your educational work as well as your retreats. And yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, I've always been super passionate about health, fasting, human potential, possibility of immortality, like all, ancient knowledge and wisdom. And I feel like I have a natural gift of taking complex information, reading books, reading science, looking at anatomy and physiology and so much, and looking at every aspect. I'm a skeptic, so if somebody's got really profound information, I like to absorb the information, but then look at the other end of it and then absorb that
Yeah.
information and then come to my own conclusion about what's actually true or more true for me. And then I have a really good way of just disseminating the information in a very simple way for people to digest without having to go to all that work. And then I've created programs and processes that when people get into it, they tend to have profound experiences. And then, it's just about sharing those experiences and learning more and adding pieces. And, I come from a foundation of simplicity, like basic principles, foundational principles of health. And it's funny because all these things were shared with me. Really, credit is due to my father for laying the foundation some, 30, 40 years ago. And I've focused on it for so long. And now we have the likes of Andrew Huberman and Joe Rogan and all of these, podcasters and gurus that are like super excited about the science of like, you know, getting your eyes in the light in the morning and going for a walk and drinking water and like all these basics. And, there's millions of followers. It's like, man, my dad has been talking about this stuff for 40 years without any science, just intuitive knowledge and study from ancient cultures, et cetera. But it's cool because it's making it mainstream, bringing things back to, simplicity for people.
Yeah. Yeah, it really has become much more mainstream, and it's beautiful to see. Although I found it also sometimes challenging to look too much at specific markers, at particular numbers, when, you know, if you feel into yourself, you often feel, look, I'm off, I need to do something else, or I need to stop. When you were talking about fasting, how come that this is one of your main pillars that you teach, and probably one of the first things that you did?
Yeah, so, I was raised by a single mother
Keep going.
of three.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, raised by a single mother of three, and traditional American diet, lifestyle, these sorts of things. And it was about the age of 10, 11, 12. I had an older brother. I started to follow his pathway of kind of smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol and completely off track. And
Yeah.
then I had a summer where my father actually, I was sent out to stay with my father for a summer, first time really getting to know my father, and he was running
Oh.
fasting retreats.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, did you back then even participate in fasting?
I didn't participate in the sense that I was fasting, but I was involved with making juices and helping facilitate in any way that I could. He had this 200-acre farm, and like all of a sudden, like 30 to 40 people arrived, a lot of them with kids. They would stay in
Yeah.
different buildings my dad had. They would stay in a tent. Some of them brought RVs and things like this. And my father would just go out every morning and be in the grass and the sun, like giving
Yeah.
discourses and education. So I was just there and involved, and sometimes I was making juices, and we're going for walks with people, so I'm getting to know the people that are there. A lot of them showing up sick, and so a little bit of like hesitancy at first, but then really getting to know people, and people like shedding layers of stuff as they're fasting and just getting back to basic principles of health. So at 13 years of age, I had this drastic shift from traditional American lifestyle and school and not a lot of love and just mundane life, where I felt really suppressed because I was this excited, imaginative, totally tapped in kid in this society that just wanted to suppress and get you to sit down and shut up and all this sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden I'm out on this 200-acre farm with people fasting and
Yeah. Yeah.
literally birds and chickens and goats and horses and growing our own food and juices and sunshine and nature. And my dad, this like inspired, you know in my opinion, like looking back, enlightened individual who's helping people to heal from chronic disease. So major shift and change, and a lot of love and a lot of connection and a lot of nature just probably activated me to some degree. And then I'd go back for my school year and pick up cigarettes and alcohol and all this stuff. And then the next summer I'd come out and do it again. So it was like I was living these two lives. Literally, I'd get
Yeah.
on a plane, leave the cigarettes and the alcohol and everything behind, and spend 2 to 3 months in nature, inspired. And it was this back and forth. As soon as I got home, pick up the cigarettes and the alcohol, and school and friends and marijuana and all this type of stuff. That then eventually was the gateway to trying other, you know, recreational drugs and things. And then it just kind of spiraled. And about the age of 16, I became suicidal, kicked out of school. You know, my opinion was basically a piece of shit, doing all the wrong things, hanging out with all the wrong people, involved in police situation. And then I just had to make a choice. And so that choice was like either go and stay and live with my father and learn his ways and dedicate my life to being of service in that way, or, see where this road leads me, which I know is not good. So at the age of 16, I made that decision, went and actually lived with my father full time, and then was fully exposed to the world of fasting and health and detoxification. And, for probably 7 to 10 years, I either lived with him or very close by and was fully involved in the business model. But, it really was based around being of service and helping people to heal. So I just saw miracle after miracle after miracle. We traveled all across the United States. My father did presentations. I worked at the back table signing people up for products and programs and this sort of thing. And I was just always that kind of back end guy, but I was just absorbing everything. Like
Yeah.
we had people that came on board with us, and every time, my dad would give a talk, they were all excited at first, but then they'd just sit outside every talk that he gave. I was always in the room because, like, out of hundreds of talks that I saw, of course, there was a structure, but there were always these side tracks of like dropping new downloads and information. And so it's like every time I was receiving these upgrades. And then it eventually led to me actually going out on my own and teaching and doing, even though it's not something I was looking forward to.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I relate to that. Um, you know, I had recently a professor of intermittent fasting on my. it's not a professor of intermittent fast, but it's the professor at a university talking about intermittent fasting, and having done quite a bit of research on there. And I was really surprised to hear, and that might be just one view, that there are not as many studies on sort of longer fasting, which I thought was really strange. I'm from Europe, from Germany, where fasting is fairly normal, especially traditionally, but also especially if you go sort of more on the religious side, that's not an unusual thing over Easter and that type of thing. So I've always fasted, and recently, I think, beginning of this year, I fasted for 21 days. I didn't feel really much difference, and I think part of it is just, if you think about it, evolution-wise, there's not always food around, right? And we would
Yeah.
not drop dead within a couple of days of not eating. What's your view on that? I mean, maybe that was not quite correct, and there is much more research that just wasn't part of that person's hemisphere. I'm just surprised, I guess. Yeah, that people have that view, because in my mind, it's a pretty obvious tool, and it's tangible for someone who does it. It's like, I have a clear mind, I feel like my body is actually in a process of detoxing, or what have you. What's your take on that, or your experience?
So first of all, like if you went and actually did a 21-day water fast, that's
Wasn't
absolutely.
water.
Oh, okay.
I did do broth, like, yeah, just lots of salt, that type of thing. But sorry,
But
yes.
you drank water, had some broth, maybe some herbal
Yeah,
tea, but
yeah,
you fasted for 21 days.
yeah,
No
but
food, no sugar, no sugary drinks. Yeah,
no.
so that's a water fast.
Okay, here we go.
Okay,
All
a
right,
little
thank
bit
you.
of broth. Like if you're maybe drinking like 6 liters of broth, maybe that you're
No,
not going to
don't.
be in a fasted state. But if you're just having like cups
Yeah,
of broth and things like that, that
yeah.
will still keep you in a water fasted state of
Okay.
ketosis and autophagy and a lot of the scientific benefits of a fast.
Yeah.
And the thing to maybe get into when it comes to extended fasting is preparation is a really important piece that assists the fast to be more successful. Also, opening the channels of elimination. So our body, is making acid. That's kind of the underlying cause of all disease is inflammation. And it's like, well, what causes inflammation? Acid causes inflammation. Well, where does the acid come from? Every single cell of the body. Okay, and the body has means to detoxify these acids, but it doesn't do it efficiently when we're consuming food because it's focused on the digestive process and making energy and making more acid. So it's when we stop that process that the acids can be removed. There's 4 channels of elimination, which are defecation, urination, perspiration, and respiration. So when we're fasting, doing enemas or doing something that clears the digestive tract, because the colon, the entire lymphatic system is dumping acids into the colon. So if I'm not constantly clearing that out, those acids will back up in the colon. I don't feel so good, and then they tend to back up a little bit more. The body will essentially remove it even if you're not doing enemas or colonics, but it's more efficient if we keep that process flowing and going. Then there's urination, which requires a certain quantity of water consumption, as well as salt for electrolytes. So that's a good thing. And even in the broth, it's quite salty and stuff like that. So it can help with the regulation, but there's a certain amount of water that needs to be consumed. So I can constantly be clearing that uric acid and those things because it's all coming out of my liver, my kidneys, like all the cells of the body are starting to dump this acid that's built up over time, which is causing aging, causing disease, causing all this type of stuff. Then we have the skin, so that's perspiration. Going into a sauna every day and sweating out these toxins helps a lot. And then respiration is breathing, so doing advanced breathing techniques during the fasting process. So all of these forms of elimination plus is what we're incorporating into daily rituals while people are fasting with us, which radically enhances the detox process, makes you feel a hell of a lot better. And then I'm a big believer that any modality that you incorporate with fasting gets like a 10x in its capacity to actually assist you with healing. And just to give you like a little example of that, imagine that you have some major mental and emotional stuff and you go and see like a really good psychologist practitioner that can help you go deep and like clear some emotional trauma.
Yeah.
You do that, like there's emotional molecules that are actually physical. So if you go in and you do this major emotional clearing, that's fantastic, and it's
Yep.
all coming up and you feel like you're clearing it, but then afterwards you're like, oh, I'm exhausted, and you go eat a hamburger. You go have a hot dog, or let's say you're
Yeah.
healthier, but you go eat a meal. These emotional
Right.
molecules are very real and like wanting to come out. You're burying those emotional molecules back into your fat. So you're not really clearing the actual physical form of the cause of the emotional molecule. And this is not really discussed, but when you're fasting, there's nothing to resuppress. So this is why I say if you do emotional work while you're fasting, these emotional molecules come up, they come out, and then it's like you're actually removing it. That's one example. Another example is I bring in, let's say, chiropractors or osteopaths, and I've had people with scoliosis or issues that are doing an extended fast, and I bring in these chiropractors or osteopaths, and they are absolutely shocked that normally they'd take somebody with a scoliosis in the spine and work with that person for a year, doing maybe 2 to 3 sessions a week. And this is what they've told me. I'm not a chiropractor, I'm not an osteopath, but I've had chiropractors say when they come to my program and they facilitate chiropractic, they're seeing movement in the spine and adjusting and healing happening in 10 days that would potentially take 6 to 8 months of consistent chiropractic work. So it's like the body is supple, the body's ready to heal, the body's shifting and changing, and all these beautiful things are happening. So there's so much that we can incorporate during the fast that's going to help us to get so much more out of it. And then the thing that came up for me while you were talking is, the fast itself might be like, oh, I did 21 days on a water fast, it was kind of cool, I had a little bit of detox, didn't really feel a lot of change. The benefits of the water fast actually come 2 to 3 months later. 2 to 3 months after the fast is typically when we're then feeling like efficient and more clear, and things are starting to happen. Like we get into a flow, we have more energy, we have more clarity. But a lot of times people will not associate the feeling, or they don't even remember how they felt prior, because that's just human nature. Like, oh yeah, I did have pain. Oh yeah, I did have brain fog. Oh yeah, there was all these problems and things going on
Yeah.
that I just kind of forgot about because they slowly went away. And then all of a sudden you're in this really efficient process 2 to 3 months after the fast. And you might think like, oh, well, I saw this podcast and I started taking this supplement and all of a sudden I feel amazing. And so you're associating this supplement or this new thought process or what's present 2 to 3 months after as being the thing that's helping you, when in fact it's actually the clear out and then the rebuilding process that actually led you into the situation of being optimal.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so it seems like a baseline state that you move the body and the person in when you start fasting with them, so that they are then not only eliminating through all these pathways and emotional eliminating, but also then be ready, sort of more like a clean slate, if you like, to then work again with chiropractic or whatever have you. So that there's certainly like the body is more malleable already, really, to heal at that moment, rather than being overloaded with food, with suppressants, and so on. Do I get that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you're correcting the problems. Okay. And then once you're done correcting the problems and you go back
Yeah.
into hopefully a more educated, healthier lifestyle, it's like a baby being born and then rebuilding and regrowing, but then having such a better capacity to move forward. It's like, yeah, and then you're experiencing the benefits later down the track, again, that might not be realized, but that will have you for the next few years in optimal running your business, living your life, doing your
Yeah.
things that really should be incorporated beyond 40 years old, probably yearly, or at least every other year, doing an
Yeah.
extended fast to continuously reverse the aging process, reverse the damage, heal yourself, and then to stay optimal. And what comes up for me in that is Socrates and Plato, specifically,
Yeah.
who a lot of people are aware of, made a statement, both made the same statement that 10 days of fasting they would observe every single year, once a year, 10 days of fasting for mental and physical efficiency.
Yeah.
And it's easy to overlook that statement like, oh, okay, yeah, mental, physical efficiency, but there's a lot that comes with that. And when you experience it, mental and physical efficiency after a 10-day water fast each year, then you start to realize actually there's so much that's taking place and there's so much possibility of longevity. And just with what you said before, like there actually is a lot of science that has been done on extended fasting. A lot of it's, you need to dig for it. You need to find doctors and PhDs that dedicated their entire lives to this and then did the clinical research and went into it. And the reason why there's not more, public, clear and obvious extended fasting research is because it's not easy for any PhD or doctor or university that studies these things to get people to volunteer or to pay them even to, do a 20-day water fast. So it's the people like me that are so passionate about this, where I have people all the time
Yeah.
coming to me and paying me. I'm not paying people to do a clinical study. They're paying me, massive amounts of money to hold space and provide the 5-star and all the things that then I can look at clinically, their bloods, their biomarkers, their blood pressure, all the vitals and everything on a daily basis and see their medical records prior, during, after, remission, healing, and then stack these things and use them as testimonials and gaining, knowledge and wisdom as to the process of what's happening. And at the same time, I don't have the big laboratories and the specific, telomere lengthening and some of these other aging clock situations, which is becoming more readily available. So I, of course, have dug deep into the research, and memorized it through saying it so many times to other people that I know most of the details of what's taking
Yeah.
place on an extended fast. And
You
just to
know,
add to that real
yeah.
quickly is, it's easy to get people to do intermittent fasting for 30 to 60 or 90 days and do the research on that. And what people should realize is that intermittent fasting actually is just the way that we should live. It's nothing special. It's just, it is special and it's amazing, but it's actually just the way human beings should live. And then you're not ever really getting the radical benefits of fasting unless you're moving beyond 48 to 72 hours. That's when the real benefits
Yeah.
of fasting happen. So a lot of people that do intermittent fasting, they're never actually reaping the real benefits of fasting.
Just coming back, it sort of relates to this whole research side of things. And, like the Newtonian way is basically you reduce a topic to the very, very core or very small area so that you can, with clarity, say black and white. And I think it got us, humanity, in a lot of trouble to try to do this. And I suppose when you were talking about, people like Huberman or other people that Joe Rogan has on his podcast, they they have found ways to at least quantify certain things that are a little bit broader. So intermittent fasting, for example, I would say now you can at least, like have certain markers there that really clearly say, hey, this is really good for you. But when listening to your sort of wider frameworks that you teach, I don't know if science will ever get there, but we're selling ourselves short by just following what science says is right. And I get where we're coming from when we do that, and I get that there's insurance involved as well, that people can't just do whatever if they want to be insured and so on. But the downside of that, I feel, is it will be never holistic. And you will, as you said, like, if, for example, there might be centers that just not feeling comfortable doing a full fasting and just intermittent fasting because that's what the insurance says. And then, I don't know. It's just, there is certainly this conundrum of the modern world wanting to quantify everything. It's like, look, our gut is pretty good in determining whether something is dangerous or not. And I stick to that.
Yeah, I totally get that. And yeah, this wanting to understand the micro so much that we lose
Yeah.
sight of the macro has led us into some serious problems.
Mm.
because for example, it's like you take a simple root like turmeric, and it's like, oh my god, turmeric, it's anti-inflammatory, it boosts your immune system, it can have a powerful impact on the reversal of cancer. And then science is like, oh well, it has to be one thing inside of there that's doing
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Oh, curcumin. Oh, okay, we need 20,000 milligrams of curcumin, and so they extract it and they give it to people, and it might have a positive effect. But then there's turmeric that has no curcumin whatsoever that still gets the result of reversing cancer and getting all the benefits. And it's like, we have to
Oh
actually
man.
just eat the root. There's more to the root than just the curcumin. But this is
Yeah.
where we've gotten to, where we're always looking for that one little thing to justify and then try to extract and just do the one little thing. And the thing about science, that if it's real science,
Yeah.
based on the actual principles of science and not just, caught up in the religion of science, science will always get there and prove even the long-term fasting and all the things that will add the insurance and everything else once we get there. But like you said, it's the intuition that precedes the scientific discoveries. And for example, my father didn't have what I have. I have access to, so many different universities that have done the extended 30-day, 40-day water fast and testing everything on multiplicity of humans, animals, etc., and then print the research. And I've memorized it, and I can tell you what that research specifically states in a multiplicity of ways. But back in the day, 40 years ago, when my father was facilitating 20, 30, 40-day water fasts, he was saying, when you do a fast, your body burns fat and you make stem cells that regenerate the entire body. You can heal brain tissue, you can heal your eyes, you can heal your heart, you can heal your nervous system, the nerves themselves. And there's so many cases of people that did it, but he was saying that at a time solely based on observation and experience, but it was completely non-scientific. So when he would say these things, for example, there was a doctor, Dr. David Clow from John Hopkins University, that came to my dad's talks, and my dad was saying all these things, and he's just like, oh my God, this is amazing, but where is the science to prove and back what you're saying? And he would go dig through all the research and be like, oh, you're just making this stuff up, you're high on your own supply, this is not true, because there was no science to back it up. But then
Yeah.
the same guy, David Clow, a couple years down the track, a scientific study would come out of a university proving what he had heard years ago, and he'd be like, oh my God, like, this is actually true. And this
Yeah.
happened over and over. And I met this guy, this PhD doctor, head of John Hopkins University, and
Yeah.
he built a file on my father. Don Tolman was right again, and he would file every time he got these scientific
Yeah. Yeah.
papers that would like
Oh,
confirm
I think.
these
Yeah.
things my dad was saying. He'd put it into this file and get excited and share it with my dad, and my dad would be like, "Yeah, see," like crazy stuff.
Yeah. So crazy. And actually, to go into a topic that most people probably would also say, hey, this can't be real, is you make this connection, correct me if I'm wrong, between iridology and fasting. It just happened to be, and maybe that's not exactly the connection, but I saw sort of that in the same sentence when I read a little bit about you. And it happened that this last fast that I did earlier this year came out of a date with my wife, where I basically said, she said, what do you want for your birthday? And I said, just three exciting and surprising things in one day. She said, great, can do that. And so just after Christmas, we went on our date, and had three different things. One of it going to an iridologist, and I had been exposed to iridology before. Amazing stories, absolutely unreal, where no one else could figure out what was wrong. Iridologist looks into the eyes and said, I think I know what's going on here. Won't go into detail. I've shared this story before on this podcast, but my point is this: in this iridology session, the person clearly identified, hey, you really could do with another fast. You haven't done one for a few years now, and I can see that would really help you. Is that a tool that you use to determine a lot about I would say, digestion and toxicity, or is it a little bit wider than that? It's just something that most people would probably disregard, even though it's very obvious if you get a
Yeah.
reading that they know something about you that, they shouldn't unless it works. Mm.
Yes. So, this brings me back to like the ancient physicians in Egypt. If you look up on Google or any platform, and you can find that the original physician was called Imhotep. And he was very profound physician, teaching lots of things. And there's physicians before him that I know about that, history doesn't share. But then Hippocrates eventually came to Egypt, spent 7 years, learned iridology, learned sclerology, learned face glyphics and how to read the tongue and how to read the nails and look at the skin, look at the posture, tonality of voice, like smell of the urine, like looking at poop, like everything to
Yeah.
diagnose disease. And originally,
Hmm.
that's how disease was diagnosed. The eyes don't lie, the eyes are the window to the soul. Your eyes carry the genetic information of your forefathers and mothers. The right eye, your father, the left eye, your mother. And it brings us the information of your genetic weaknesses. But then in this lifetime, where we've gotten off track and where we've accumulated acids and where we've become chronic in the liver or the kidneys or the lungs or wherever it's built up, you can directly see that in the eyes. And there's a corresponding emotional, energetic relationship with the organs and with what's going on as well. So we can look into the eyes and see where the disease is accumulated. I know what the main emotional, negative, reoccurring thought patterns and negative processes are energetically, which I can just nail in a second just by looking at somebody's eyes. So I'll sit down with people and they'll, hey, good to meet you, whatever, look in their eyes and be like, I'll say one line and they're crying or they're like, holy shit, how do you know this about me? Because there is this energetic, emotional side and a very physical side to iridology. The thing that we need to understand is that iridology is a set nervous system window into everything that's going on. And what I mean by that is everything that you've accumulated negatively will show up in the eyes. But if you go and do an extended fast and actually heal the whole thing, it's not necessarily going to change the iris specifically. So you might have healed everything, and then an iridologist
Right.
looks at it and says, oh, well, you still have this problem because it's more of a nervous system set negative. But then we have around the eyes called the sclera, the whites of your eyes. There's a whole nother study. So I started in iridology. I spent many years studying iridology, teaching iridology, doing iridology, and then realized, oh my God, there's a whole nother study called sclerology, which is the whites of the eyes, which is the lymphatic fluid of the body, not the nervous system like the iris. It's the lymph system. And the lymph system will actually give us detailed information of what's happening right now. So when you incorporate the two, like the ancient physicians did, you can see where the disease has progressed and gotten to at some point. You can see the genetic weakness, but then you can look into the sclera and say, oh, this is a major problem now. We need to clean the liver or the colon, or we need to focus on the kidneys. And the sclera will actually show us the link of the cause. For example, let's say somebody goes to the doctor says, you have kidney disease.
Yeah.
Okay, I can look in the iris, I can see the kidney disease. I can look in the sclera and it will tell me the main contributing factors to the kidney disease. For example, I might see a line coming from the spine leading to a toxicity in the kidney, and I know that the person, their spine has a subluxation, and so the nervous system's not delivering the signal and the energy for the kidneys to function correctly. So I can send that person to a chiropractor. I can help them, give them exercises to correct the spine so that the kidneys have the energy necessary to function properly. Or I could see that the colon's congested and full of shit, leading to the kidney toxicity, or both, or something else. And then I can be like, oh, look, like if you clean your colon and keep that clean for a while and then, do these other, obviously there's herbs, there's emotional connections and things. So when you approach it from a holistic perspective, then, having iridology, having sclerology is super powerful. Like if I only had one methodology that I could use, it would be sclerology, because I can see what's happening right now with congestion, toxicity, encapsulation, which could be tumors or cysts or cancer. But to have iridology can show me the stage of disease, where there's weakness. Sclerology can tell me what's happening now. And then the other modality I lean towards is actually blood chemistry. So I think the one really powerful thing that came out of the pharmaceutical industry is, you can go get a set of labs done, your blood's done, and you know immediately if you have a vitamin D deficiency, a B12 deficiency, an iodine deficiency, if your hemoglobin's low, if your immune system's just completely out of whack. There are qualities of your immune system that will tell you if you have a parasitic infection, a viral infection, things like this. So to be able to look at bloods, be able to look at the eyes, these are probably some of the best forms of developing what a diagnosis actually is. But then being an alternative practitioner, we know what to do to get to the underlying cause and heal it, not just hit it with poison to suppress or try to be at war with the body, which sometimes is necessary. Major infections, antibiotics, saves a lot of people's lives. But then, it's just this constant fight against disease rather than the actual embracing of health and removing most of the underlying cause of chronic disease is lifestyle, and it's all preventative. And anything that you can prevent with certain methods, you can probably heal with the same methods.
I try to formulate here a question that sort of bypasses the whole thing of how did we get into this, society, that is. You've studied the ancients. You've studied things that happened, on a wider scale, time scale, and I'm sure you have seen sort of like patterns in society, patterns of the earth, and so on. And so my thing, rather than saying it's ignorance of our people, we don't actually want to do the work. It's the pharmaceuticals that have a really clear interest that is just driven by a particular framework of commerce. It's ignorance of people who can't see what you can't see, you can't prove. Therefore, it's not Newtonian. Therefore, it doesn't work. So I bypass all of that and hope that you have sort of like a message of hope. For this whole situation that we're in, because when you actually look back, there were so many tools available to us before we went into really, dissecting medicine and going there. Do you think this is just actually a journey that humanity goes through, and we will eventually have another time of enlightenment where these things are just accepted, even though we might not be able to prove everything with tests to the nth degree?
I totally get your question, and it's the crux of my life work research essentially is that if you really want to back up the truck, what's really going on is there are principles that were laid out by one of the greatest teachers of all time, referred to as Hermes Trismegistus. Again, it goes back to ancient Egypt and Atlantis and an enlightened society that practiced all these things and lived this way. And then how'd we get here? So we need to understand the principle of as above, so below is quite literal in the sense that every single day we wake up in the morning, the sun rises, and we have about 12 hours of sunlight, and we're awake, and everything's great, and birds are chirping, and you go outside, nature, and everything's great. And then the sun goes down, it sets. In fact, the bad guy in Egypt was called Set. So when Set rules, the sun sets, we go into a period of darkness. So every day we're 12 hours of light, 12 hours of darkness. When the darkness is there, we should be asleep. And then when the sun comes up, we should be awake. And this is a cycle that's consistent. 12 hours light, 12 hours dark. On a grander scale, we're going through cycles of a 12,000 year enlightened state and a 12,000 year sleep and dark state. Okay? And so when we actually reverse back 12,000 years from now, 12,000 years ago, we'll find an era and a time when the entire planet, an enlightened civilization of multiplicity of people and technologies and things that existed, that's being kind of proven now by these big gurus out there Graham Hancock and people that are like, oh, actually civilization's much older than what we've been told. Everything's been lost. We're going through this cycle. About 12,000 years ago, there was a massive flood that destroyed and wiped out and suppressed everything because we were going through a cycle of darkness. And so for the past 12,000 years, we've been in a sleep state and darkness and war and negativity and forgetting who we are and all the things. And there have been societies and culture prior that knew that this was coming, have always had secret societies and things where they've tried to hold the consciousness. And there have been beings like myself, probably yourself and other people that are, cooking with gas, so to speak, that have been a little bit more onto it than everybody else that's really just in this sleeping state. So there's always a portion of the population that is more awake through the practices and through the experience of trauma and waking up and having these things that are trying to wake up other people while we're in this 12,000 year period. But now we are at finally the precipice of moving into what was referred to as the age of Aquarius. And we are now in a state where, we've shifted, and now everything that has been happening over the last 12,000 years is coming to light, and it's sick and it's dark, and there's all the systems, all the processes, everything is crashing, burning, restructuring, and we will end up back in vibrationally a higher state where, consciousness will kick in to such a degree that, technologically, biologically, and a multiplicity of things will come in to actually end this period of darkness and bring us back into this enlightened state. And that's what the, individuals like myself, maybe yourself and others are pre-facilitating fasting, detoxification, awakening, and all these things to bring as many people as possible into a state of consciousness that they'll survive moving into the next stage. Because there probably will be a massive exodus of souls that are not ready to experience the next phase of what we're going to go through here in this place. But we want to give the opportunity to as many souls as possible to make it through the next 5 to 7 years as these new things are coming in, and then it can, we can all put away our weapons and, relax and start to see the benefits of humanness.
Paradise on Earth. That would be good. Yeah, you were talking about Atlantis before and Egypt. Just in a nutshell, I know that, was it Pluto or Socrates had memories, or no, had knowledge of stories of Atlantis. Do you know the timeline that led to, I guess, do you know the timeline of when Atlantis was around versus, when this knowledge sort of moved then on to Egypt, really, and then also to Greece?
Yeah. So, first of all, it was Plato. So Plato went and spent, I believe, about 12 years in Egypt and learned from Solon and learned from the priests and the people, and were told the mysteries and shown underground, like what's really going on. Certain levels didn't go down to the full level, but certain levels of what was happening. And then Plato went back and he changed the world as we know it. He's known as the greatest philosopher. It's said that every philosopher after Plato is just notating Plato's work and then expanding upon it, potentially, if that's possible. So Plato really was this powerful dude that changed the world as we know it based on what he learned. And then he wrote into the Timaeus and Critias because it's not something you could just come out and say. He wrote it into a play and kind of like a fiction, but he wrote every detail of Atlantis, what it looked like, who lived there, the mountains in the background, like down to the detail of like what types of metals, what types of stone was used in the outer layers versus the inner layers, and described every detail of Atlantis, which you wouldn't do in a simple, stupid fiction. Like he was laying it all out there, right? So, I'll share the truth with you, and the truth comes from its origins, which I've been able to tap into the true teachers of the ancient Egyptian wisdom who were taken in to the truth and lived their entire lives learning this information, practicing the processes. And I found an individual that I read his book and I was just like, this guy's the one. And then I went and trained with him every year. I'd spend time with this guy, absolute sage. And, you know, so the truth is, ancient Atlantis probably fell between around 52,000 BC is when Atlantis fell. And when Atlantis fell, anywhere from 52,000 to 36,000 BC, there was these major shifts and changes. And Atlantis crashed, but the hierarchy, the originators of Atlantis, I'm talking like Ptah, Osiris, Tahuti, known as Hermes Trismegistus, and what were called the Og-Doad, or the 8 original primordial immortal beings that lived in Atlantis. And I know all this sounds crazy. These individuals brought their ships, brought their technology, brought all the knowledge and the wisdom, and buried it, and built a marker called the Great Pyramid over it in the pyramid complex, and then built 13 temples along the Nile. And then we're trying to assist humans to go through this process of human evolution to become, you know, enlightened and to maintain this energy as long as possible through the next shift, or, you know, multiple shifts that have been happening. So, you know, I would say, my teacher would say, Egyptian teacher would say, that the pyramids were built at about 52,000 BC, 52,006 specifically. And then, but between that time and maybe 36,000 BC, the Sphinx and all the complexes and everything were completed. So we need to understand that, you know, when people look at the Sphinx and they say, oh, you know, it's the sign of Leo and the sun rises and it's giving us, you know, Leo, the age of Leo, you know, and they might say, you know, 12,000 years ago or whatever is when it was built. Well, they need to go back a couple more cycles. Wow. It's actually much older. You know, they're on point by observing it and looking at the stars, but they don't realize there's actually more cycles involved with it. So just to answer your question, from my perspective, you're looking at, you know, tens of thousands of years BC when the complex was built and everything that was happening. And this is also in like the Turin Papyrus and the King's List. So the King's List that's been written in multiple papyrus and on the walls of, you know, some of the temples. And then if you look at the Sumerian text and their King's Lists, which is, you know, you have Sumerian society and you have Atlantean Egyptian society. And we need to know, like, who were these people and who were these people and what were they about and what were they doing. But they all have their own records and timelines, and all of it, you know, consists of showing kings that were immortal and then getting down to the point to where it was then human kings and pharaohs, and then kind of when the humans took over, essentially.
Fantastic. I love it.
Long time ago.
Love it. Oh man, it's really hard to contain my questions of sort of like a red thread and sort of like staying in what you already said. But basically what you're also hinting towards is that before that time, or during the Atlantean time, the original 8, I think you said, saints, they might be not Earth origin as we would define a human.
So the original 8 primordials were a couple, Kek and Kekit, a black immortal couple that brought in the black human race. They are the actual primordial forefathers to the black race, which came in first. Then there were Asian couple, immortal, that brought in the Asian race called the Bringers of the Dawn. Then there were the red race. So you have 8, but it's couples, so there's 4. So there's the black race, the Asian race, the red race, and then eventually the white race. And they all came in at different time frames, and they all held, you know, codes or certain genetics and certain gifts and maybe drawbacks. But then in Atlantis, all those races and individual, supposedly humans, lived together in an enlightened state. Yeah. But then this big crash and the wipeout of Atlantis was coming. So those original primordials, as well as, the individuals that saw what was coming, they all migrated and established themselves in Egypt. So we need to understand that all races were in Egypt in its enlightened state. And if you go to Egypt and just shut your mouth and close your ears to what everybody's saying, you'll see and find out there were white pharaohs, there were black pharaohs, there were Asian pharaohs, and there were red pharaohs. And so we have all this debate, and black people want to own Egypt, and sometimes white people, depict white people in Egypt, and then you have the local race that's there, which I would call more of a red race, kind of like Native Americans in America, and kind of the more red race. They're not black, okay, and they're not Asian, and they're not white. The multiplicity of the majority of people that are there.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting thing. And when I go to Egypt and run tours, and I'm with what you would consider the elites in Egypt, like the people that are really onto it, running the tours and in government and everything else, and I'm having these conversations, and I'm like, well, talking about race, and I'm like, yeah, you guys are the red race. They'll be like, no, we're not. We're white. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Like, you kind of look like a tan white person. But yeah, and this brings up, race and things like this. But the whole point is all races live together in an enlightened state, loving each other and gaining something from each other for many thousands of years. And I believe that racism now is only a thing that media wants to promote just to divide us, cause problems, and keep us from understanding who we are and where we come from, and so much more. And race, I think, for the majority isn't an issue. It's just for a minority, but it's being blown up by media and things that are going on. So I know that's a little bit of a sidetrack, but yeah,
Loved it though.
all those
Good.
individuals came to Egypt and still were there for quite some time until they're not.
Yeah. I heard you talking about the Sphinx as well as the pyramids, and I hadn't heard about what you were talking about, what's below the Sphinx. But just to widen the topic that I'm thinking of is, you probably have seen the research recently saying, there are certain things underneath the Egyptian certain pyramids, and it goes further down. It's a battery. It's a I don't know. It's another construct and so on. Does that fit in with the topic of what's below the Sphinx? Is that sort of like a similar thing that
Of course.
you were referring to?
Yeah. So when these individuals came to Egypt, they buried
Yep.
everything. And when I say buried, they didn't like dig a hole and put it there.
Yeah.
There's entire city. Okay. There's entire cities, which we can't even comprehend, 2 kilometers deep underneath the pyramid complex. The Sphinx is an entrance. The pyramid is an entrance. It's a structure that's feeding into. It's a two-way street. What's going on down there is benefiting what's going on up here, and what's going on up here is benefiting. It's a replicated model. Okay, imagine a pyramid on top, which is massive and huge, and oh my God, how was this ever built? And then when they discover the 8 descending shafts that are 648 meters deep, then with these 80 meter by 80 meter by 80 meter boxes, right? We need to understand that then on the other side, there's also a pyramid with these things, and it's all connected. And we're only seeing maybe a portion of that, right?
Yep.
So, this is being discovered with these scans and everything else, and there's probably areas that, maybe it's not the time and place to talk about, but that's essentially the entrance to this other thing that's going on.
Oh,
Yeah.
good for us. Yeah, no, it's really exciting times, and I guess that's where technology is really a blessing, because we can do things that prior to us having that technology, you had to be really tuned in, or had to access, call it higher
And the
powers to actually even
technology
know about it.
finding these things allows us to tune in. Okay, if you don't know what to tune in to. But as soon as you have something that exposes something, we are something far more than what we've been told. And if the individual can meditate on, the things that have been discovered, then they can go there. There's some places we can't go due to energetic blocks, but having these technologies, all of this is happening on purpose. Nothing's like, oh, hey, we just happened to discover this. No, the time is now available. This was meant to be discovered at this time. And there's a process that they all go through in the development and satellites and all this sort of stuff, but it's because of the exposure and what's meant to take place that these things are happening at these times. And then it's up to individuals like us that are into fasting and detoxification and opening up and learning new rituals and processes to enhance our senses to be able to tap into and then precognate, the steps and the processes to assist other, or just for myself to dedicate my life to these things for being ahead of the game of what's to come and making sure I can still be here energetically and everything else for what's to come, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And to me, that's really mastery of like being of service, following your path of discovering something, sharing it with the world, but at the same time, looking after your individual person as well, your own development, but also being strong enough for that. I recently, it's quite an unusual thing. I'm surprised about myself. Became quite interested in sort of like Hollywood. It sounds, I can't believe I'm even saying that, but more from the point of view of people analyzing movies. One particular channel that I'm watching, but what part of that is also where they show people that had a lot of fame and then sort of like crash and burn basically, and I realized that you have to step up to that, and that sort of relates to when you're saying like there's knowledge that is accessible to us if we step up to that, and that has also to do with our personal development, I guess. And in many ways, if you think about it, when you are becoming a parent, there is a step up or it's a particular switch that you need to do to actually be able to look after someone and to guide them in their early lives and and facilitate that. And I guess that's true for knowledge, for your path or your endeavors, that you also have to do the foundational work for yourself. What comes to mind when I say foundational work, there is a science fiction series from the 1950s talking about particular the foundation, which is basically it's set, I believe, in the future, and someone looked up the future and basically said at these points certain things will happen, and they could look into the future and said like we will develop, and then and it reminds me on what you were saying of like there are certain energetic blocks that only unlock as development or time has moved on, and it just strikes me as quite interesting that that's sort of like there's a synchronicity with that body of work.
Yeah, cool. Love it.
Very good. Now, you get exposed to a lot of knowledge, I can tell, and you're putting frameworks around it. How are you able to see that? Do you go back to principles that allow you to take on someone's voice and the tone D is missing? Therefore, that relates to a particular organ. Therefore, I know that there are certain herbs, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, these are the herbs that relate to that. Like, does this become to you a language that you can read no matter what the exact symbols are? Like, I'm just wondering, like, how do you put this in something so bite-sized? You must have, to do that, you have to have a context that is that, and then you can see the principles to bring this back to a framework. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I'm a believer there have been frameworks in place, thousands of years ago to educate the physician. There's been frameworks in place to train the Jedi warrior. And that was the actual name of them. It's in a papyrus called the Jedi. And so, there are teachers that have, gained access to these processes and structures that were already in place, but then through their own process of meditation and fasting and clarity, they make the structure more profound and easier for others to follow. So, I've had great sages as teachers in my life. My father, Don Tolman, is a great sage who fasted 40 days and 40 nights, 5 years in a row, did the travel, did the research, found the basic principles, created structures and things. And then, of course, like I've taken all of his knowledge and wisdom that was absorbed into me at a very young age, and then I've become very interested in the sciences and looking at other gurus doing things, and then sublimating all of it into my own, simplified process with a bit of backing and research. And then I found the Egyptian guy who, lived his entire life going through the ancient Egyptian physical culture, reading and writing, and, so much knowledge and wisdom, but then simplified it into a daily practice, right? And then had rituals that over time, once you've built yourself enough through the daily practice, then you do this, and this will open up telepathy and telekinesis and all these things that these ancient Jedi had. You can tap into air, fire, earth, and water and work with it in ways that would be considered actual magic, right? And so then what I am interested in, because I want to do it, I want to do these processes, but I won't because I'm too busy building a business or doing other things and having a family. So what I do is I build the process out, try to simplify it so that I can teach it. And if I'm getting paid to teach it to other people, then I'm in the practice of actually doing it, right? And then through the process of doing it over and over and over and over again, you start to find the things that are actually practical and most profound for getting some type of movement and access. It's a sublimation process. It's alchemy. And so the first half of my life, I focused on the health and the fasting and the things, and I'm still doing that. I'm in it, pretty much every day, going into the center, working with people fasting. Not every day, every other day, going and doing that and seeing and getting the results and keeping on top and doing iridology and sclerology and mental and emotional and breath work and all these things. But then on my off days and other things, this is something that's becoming more like the ancient Egyptian physical culture, the higher senses, the warrior side of things is in development still. And it's developed quite a bit, but it's still got some time before it really becomes the thing that it's meant to become, which is like a Jedi school. So really what's happening is the ancient Egyptian process was becoming a physician and a teacher and a warrior magician for the highest echelons. So essentially what's streaming through me and what's probably streaming through other people on the planet at the exact same time is teaching people to become a physician, warrior magician, and become Jedi.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. And one could that's a good prospect. So you're going actually to Egypt with people to sort of, I guess, walk history a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, just out of interest, talking about the Jedi School?
Yeah, so I go on tour, I stand on stage, I open up a big window of like, hey, who are we? Where did we come from? What was going on? A lot of this conversation. And then I say, hey, if this sparks your interest and you're feeling it, come to my 8-day Jedi program, which now we're also building out the content into an online portal so people can just access it and take it at their own pace. But this has been an 8-day program for since 22. So 4 years now. I've been running these programs like twice a year, and it's full like martial arts training, strength training, breath work, meditation, advanced deep meditations and processes that activate us, awaken us. And then once people have, the download of like, where do we come from? What's all this stuff? Like a big download, then only then will I take those people to Egypt. Because then we're all going to Egypt with the same understanding of what's really going on. And then you can prove it. Because I'll take an Egyptologist down there, and even the Egyptologist is like, what you're saying makes way more sense than what I've been telling people for 30 years.
Oh, dear.
And then, Egyptologists are like, oh, shit, how am I going to keep telling the same lie now that I know? And that takes, a few, 3, 4, 5 days of unpacking what's really going on. But when you're in the Serapeum underground looking at, 800-ton pure cut, whatever it is, 100-ton pure cut boxes and put into these underground facilities, and I just tell you what it is and what it was used for, it makes way more sense and it's obvious than what, oh, they buried some bulls, some bullshit. So yeah, we take people on the full tour, 5-star, overlooking the pyramids, getting
Yeah.
private access, going to all levels of the pyramids just with my group, activating the pyramids with frequencies and doing specific rituals in there. And that's like day 2. And then you're
Yeah.
so charged up that the rest of the time you're high from that activation in the pyramid that then you're going to all these places, it's a full Nile cruise, going to all the temples underground. Like there's nowhere on earth like Egypt.
Oh man, that sounds fantastic.
It is.
Yeah, and I relate to you to the priming. Basically, you got to be ready to do certain things, and I think that relates to anything in life. Really, that is a little bit more advanced. I mean, you don't do water rafting straight away on the most dangerous, river, because it won't be fun. You want to do the training first, the slow thing first, and then you can enjoy the more extreme. It's the same with knowledge, I found. And I sometimes have to really bite my tongue with my children on certain topics. They might not be even esoteric, but just more adult-like. And I know it can derail people or just completely block it, and I don't want to hear it because it doesn't make any sense to me. So I totally understand where you're coming from when you say, you want to do some prep, some really, really good foundations in place to do something else.
Egypt, I can't imagine going to Egypt and having an Egyptologist sitting there at all the locations telling you some truth and some bullshit, but really like all they know is the information of what was going on after the fall of the true Egyptian empire.
Yeah.
We need to understand that Egypt itself and the buildings and everything else, the ancient Egyptians studied the ancient Egyptians. Okay? The ancient Egyptians that we know about had no clue what the pyramid was actually for.
Wow.
They have no idea. They just were still there in their sleep, probably more awakened than most people on the planet, but still we need to understand, like, I'm talking cycles. Tens of thousands of years. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what the best experience you can have is to get the knowledge and the education and actually practice in the purification, then go there and shut your mouth, go in and just experience and meditate, especially in the pyramid, but in all the temples too. Like, these are activation gateways that are, harmonics that activate your DNA built into stone. The Akashic records are built into stone and into mathematics that resonate into you. And it's going to work either way when you go in. But when you go in, you got some Egyptologists like, oh, this person and that person and Seti the first and, Ramses the second, Ramses the second, Ramses the second, Ramses the second, everywhere, because he was the last guy that just annihilated what was really going on and put his face on everything. It's not helpful.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's just
Yes.
okay, just shut up and let me actually just absorb what's really going on here.
I guess a message of hope that I hear through your story that you're telling about, for example, the Akashic record, is basically if we look after ourselves and be receptive enough, get on top of sort of like our own personal issues, our personality, and so on, then it doesn't have to be written language, but it can be actually information that is more energetically there that we then intuitively also receive, right? Is that sort of what you're saying is also possible?
The greatest education is not going to be told to you. And this is where the greatest of greats said, he who speaks does not know, and he who knows does not speak. So I can speak and show you the way, but you have to do the way. You have to become the way. And the truth is the truth will always be slightly twisted so that you don't have the full truth in everything. The greatest of greats, true greats that teach, will always twist it a little bit, which means there's a little bit of false, but it's up to you to repeat and do and practice to actually unpack and receive what it actually is.
Wow.
And that cannot be put into words to teach somebody else. Only the way can be shown for you to have the experience to actually know.
Yes.
Gnosis, true gnosis, cannot be taught.
Changing gear just a little bit because we talked about Egypt. Yeah.
Is it possible here to pause for 1 minute?
Sure. Of course. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Oh yes, you do that. You do that. All right. While we get some more water. That's fantastic, and it sort of marks the difference between, talking about Egypt, talking about sort of ancient knowledge that, in many ways, is practical already today, even if you don't understand the depth of it. But to go there, and that's what I will ask next, is really like the foundational layers of getting to good health, to get to vibrant health, if you like, have to do with the physical health, but also physical health, as we heard before, are related to underlying psychological things, our psyche, working with things that, might be traumas from our childhood, or might be just traumas that we carry through generations. And you might remember on other podcasts, we talked about this phenomenon that you actually can see that things happen in 1 or 2 generations ago, and they somehow weave themselves into the next generation. It becomes a topic or an issue or a fear or something like that. And I found that fascinating, having actually children and seeing that they certainly... There you are.
Sorry, I was busting.
Fair enough. I have a little bit of a feedback loop at the moment. Can you hear that?
I can't.
Let me see. No, it's gone now. Must have been while you were away. That's good. Awesome. Tyler, I'm aware of the time. I just have a couple more questions that sort of relate more to the foundational work that, well, I call it foundational work, but the work that you do with people at your retreats. As you said, you would go to, I think it's your microphone has shifted.
Test. It might have shifted to my computer. It says DJI Mini.
All right. Now it's better. Yeah. It seems better now. Before that, sounded like it was raining outside. So when people come to your retreat, what are the? I hope you don't mind me asking. What are sort of the main topics that people come to you? I guess all sorts of issues and elements and what have you present themselves in people, but the underlying issues and challenges. Are there some sort of like top 5 that you find and have solutions for?
Yeah, well, I would say that most people that come to us have some form of cancer. I think, when people get cancer, then they're finally willing to actually invest in themselves and go through a process of healing, and open on all levels to go there. We get a lot of people with Lyme disease, cardiovascular issues, and autoimmune conditions as well. And there's things that I know, like if the person's coming with a certain condition and they do an extended water fast, it's 100% going to work. And then there are things that are kind of like, depending on how enrolled the person is and where they're willing to go, it'll work or it might not. And yeah, like, I don't know if you're asking more emotionally, what are the underlying issues, or if it's just the chronic conditions, but I really find that most disease is probably related to self-doubt, not feeling good enough, trauma from childhood, and also off mission. I think when people,
Purpose.
don't understand who they are and their passion and their mission in life, and they're just working mundanely and doing things, the universe is constantly trying to get you to wake up and move into the position of doing what you're meant to do. But if we've never been taught how the universe speaks to us, then we just continually feel lost and unlucky and all these things. And then eventually disease sets in to create a refocusing of, oh, what's most important? I need to heal myself. I need to fast. I need to wake up. I need to purify. And usually through that process, the awakening leads to, oh, actually, I'm meant to be doing this thing that, I was passionate about when I was a kid, or, I've been exposed to maybe in some way, or maybe they haven't been, but it sets them on a journey of self-discovery to find out like why they're here, what they're passionate about. And I say that because usually it's the thing you're most passionate and excited about, that when you just do that, that's where your mission in this life is going to be unpacked and discovered. And when we're on mission and we're on purpose, the word purpose means pure position. And when you're in that pure position, experiencing that passion, that's the energy that's moving through the body that's no disease can exist in.
Yeah.
And for example, like there have been individuals in the past that were so passionate about what they were creating and doing that they could just completely ignore all the other principles of health: air, water, sunshine, exercise, whole foods, relationships.
Anything.
And they're so passionate that they crack on, they don't get sick, like it feeds them. So passion is such a big part of the human experience that I think a lot of times, it is the actual underlying cause of the disease. So my job is to, obviously physically detoxify and get things working, but to also to mentally and emotionally clear trauma and unpack so much and assist the individual in discovering like, why are you here? And then, someone with stage 4 cancer, prognosis, you're going to be dead in 1 to 2 years. It's like, if you 100% heal from this, what are you going to do? And if you don't know what that is, then why should I even support you to heal yourself? Because you're just going to spiral back into what you were doing and die anyways. Like, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
If you completely heal from this, what are you going to do? What level of service are you going to provide? What are you going to do that's going to change yourself and change the world? And the people who get that all of a sudden commit, disease is just a moment in time for them. And I'm talking about major. I had this guy, Happiest, with this big brain tumor. He's married, got a couple of beautiful young girls. And he's like, they want to operate, and they're saying I might lose function and all these other things. And everybody around him, naturopaths, doctors, nutritionists, everybody's like, just get the surgery, just get the surgery. He calls me while I'm on a water fast in North Bali, and I have this big conversation. He's scheduled in 2 weeks to have have the surgery done. And, I'm just like, well, look, if you've already scheduled, you're going to do it, you can come afterwards and heal and blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, Tyler, like, what would you do? He asked the right question.
Yes.
And I'm like, there's not a chance I would have surgery, period. No chemo, no radiation, this is what I would do. And I'd like, here's the history of people that have healed even from brain tumors, and this is what I would do. And he's just like, oh, he felt it. He's like, that's my way. And maybe not for everybody, but he's like, man, that's the way for me. And then the next day I had to have another hour-long conversation with his wife. But then they all came to Bali. I actually gave him a place to stay for his wife to stay with the kids, and then he booked into our hub. And the biggest thing for him was the restructuring of what the hell he was doing in life, and actually realizing that the thing that he was most passionate about, that he thought he had to make all this money and stuff and do and suck his life force before he could do that, he could actually just drop it all and do that because it was life or death at this point. And he left this fasting program and never even went back to hospital. And I've messaged this guy like every 6 months, like, hey, how you going? And I was even saying maybe you should go get a scan and see if the tumor shrunk. And he's just like, I'll never go back. And he's just living his passion.
Yes.
I ain't got time for that. I'm too busy doing what I love now.
Yeah. Look, if you think about that statistic of, people say, I don't know where the statistic comes from, but 70% of all people are not happy in their job. That gives me a little bit of an insight of why we are so sick nowadays. And I see that even in the very small, when I think about my oldest girl, 12, she she gets homeschool done, and that does what needs to be done. But when it comes to looking after the animals, she's happy to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, look after them, like having a ball, and you can just see like everything is so effortlessly versus learning
Pain
certain
and
things that
struggle.
she's just not passionate about, and I think thinking a little bit about the business network I know, and some people are very very successful and really well off because of it, but there's certainly a difference between people that really love what they do, and it
Mm,
could be anything. Some people really like a particular technology and they build their
mm,
business around it. Some people love safety, and a really, wouldn't be my gig. And other people, I think, are in industries because they're very lucrative or they inherited and so on, and
mm.
financially doing really, really well. But beside that, there's a lot of compensation with food, with certain habits that doesn't support really, really their life.
Mm.
But I can now see, while listening to you, that purpose has a lot to do with that. It just drives you, and if you have a mission and if there's a vision, you just keep going, and yeah, can throw out some of the good health principles. Of course, ideally do it, but I can see how that relates.
Yeah, I love it.
Love it very much. Tyler, I think we have to wrap this up. I do have normally 4 quick questions for you, if you don't mind. I just rapid fire them at you, just to sort of sign off the normal way, and I would love to hear your response anyway, if you can.
Yeah.
You got still a couple of minutes?
Yes, of course.
Oh, thank you. If you could have a green juice or coffee or whatever you like with anyone dead and alive, or alive, who would it be?
It would be one popped in there, but probably Hermes Trismegistus, also referred to
Yeah.
as Thoth or Tahuti, because he's been one of the greatest teachers of humanity. Would be fully tapped in, and it's interesting because I actually think I am in communication in another
Yeah.
way with this being, but to actually physically sit down, have a juice or a cup of coffee, and like,
Yeah.
man, like I would just I'd ask a question and just shut my mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I guess if you hold the intentions, like, where did this soul reincarnate, and is it still on Earth, and could you find it?
Mm,
Just an idea.
mm.
Um, what book was the most impactful that you read?
Whew. There's probably a book that radically impacted me when I was younger called
Mm.
The Essene Gospel of Peace. And
Yep.
that really led me along the lines of understanding where my father was coming from and dedicating my life to being of service and, eating healthy and these sorts of things. And then the other book would be from Hermes Trismegistus called The Kabbalion, like Kaiba, Kyba Lion,
Yep.
Kaiba Lion, Kabbalion. And the Kabbalion is the 7 universal principles or laws that exist that if we read it over and over and over and then visualize and see in our lives how it applies, eventually it will lead to the unpacking of knowing what's really going on here and how to be in alignment with
Cool.
universal law
Yeah.
that will have you in a state of synchronicity and bliss and a state of like a heaven-like state. So those 2
Yep.
books, The Seeing Gospel of
Very cool.
Peace, Kabbalion, are life changers for me.
The Kabbalion, is there one particular translation, or is there just one version out there?
Um, I think it's like the Kabbalion by the 3 initiates.
Okay, cool.
I'd have to
Just
look.
saying.
I'd have to look specifically if there's an author than the one I have, but
Yeah,
yeah, by the
just
3
aware
initiates,
sometimes.
they could look it up.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Thanks for that. Um, what's the best advice you ever received?
I would say there's a couple. There's one that comes up for me recently actually that says whatever the outcome you're looking for, like if your outcome wants to be connection or success, passion, feeling good, Like most of us will say, well, once I build the business and it's flowing and it's making money, then I'll have success. Once
Hmm.
I get through these processes with my wife or something happens, then I'll feel more connected or loved. And
Yeah.
the truth is that end goal that you're wanting to manifest, we need to figure out how to cultivate that end energy into the process. So whatever I'm doing on the daily basis that makes me feel that way is the only thing that will actually lead to the outcome. I need to do
Yeah.
something now that makes me feel successful in what I'm doing, and that will actually lead to my success. There is no
Yeah.
like, once I do all these things and it's hard and it sucks and I hate my life, I'll be successful and everything's gonna be great. You'll never accomplish that. Like you might have a moment of it, but then that moment's
Yeah.
gone and you're left with what you've always been doing.
Yeah. 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 Love it. Yeah. 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 You set a goal, you get a goal. And I guess having that template always present when you take action, I found really, really powerful. Not always easy, though.
Yeah.
Last question. How do you start your day normally? Do you have a particular rhythm?
Yes, every day is pretty much the same. My eyes open. I start with a bit of gratitude, big breath, a little bit of stretching, yeah, setting the intention for the day to be magical, and just glad to be alive. Then
Yeah.
I get out of bed and I hydrate. The first thing I go and get water, pinch of salt,
Mm, mm.
hydrate, maybe have some intention with it, ground. So typically I'll come outside, stand in the grass, have a wee, ground myself, eliminate a little bit.
Yep.
And then I have, a series of things. I do like an organic black coffee. So I do have a little bit of coffee after I've hydrated. And then I'm typically on the treadmill when I live here. If I'm in
Hmm.
a Western country, I go out and I go for a walk. Bali's not so easy, so I get on the treadmill. And then it's typically podcast, educational book, audio book, or something where I'm walking, maybe breathing some oxygen, maybe walking uphill, walking, learning, thinking, getting inspired, and then if I feel it running a bit, and then after treadmill, sauna, ice bath. So I have
Yo,
a
gee.
pretty good tradition
Yeah.
first thing in the morning of like
Mm.
hydration, exercise, sauna, ice bath, and then I incorporate probably 3, 4 times a week strength training, movement, some qigong type of work and connection, stuff like this, stretching, a little bit of martial arts practice. But those things are also a little bit intuitive as what I'm feeling. So yeah, I have a pretty comprehensive, 90-minute to 2 hour process. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I can't do that because I got to be to work by
Mm-mm-mm.
7 or 8." It's like, well, I get up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning so that I can fill my cup and get what I need and what I love. And then I also start work and get into the things that, are going to lead to making some money and, having some passion in life.
Yeah. Very inspiring. Tyler, thank you so much for your time. I feel honored that you spend time with me and the audience. And yeah, wish you all the best. And contemplating to come with you to Egypt once done the Jedi training. That sounds
Let's
amazing.
go.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Sebastian,